Are you ready to experience peak visual clarity? Jokes aside, we are so tanky that we don't really need to see anything, so it doesn't even matter. I'll be talking about other skills you can use, so make sure you stick around for that. I made this build because after managing FLASKS for the Flicker Strike build, I needed something nice and chill. So now we are using one button, so get ready to fight. Nope, that's not it. Spin to win. You've got to spin to win. James, why the heck are you using this skill? Also, what is it? This is FIRESTORM. It has been reworked several leagues ago. It is so unpopular that most people don't even know it exists. This build is all about energyblade. You know, that other skill that everyone thinks is dog crap? Place your weapon with an energyblade that scales with how much energy shield you sacrifice. We actually have 18k energy shield, but we sacrifice half of it for damage. Smart. We then use Instruments of Virtue to add this large amount of flat damage to our spells. So all you really need is any spell with a good added damage coefficient. FIRESTORM has 0.8 added effect, but the first hit, Giant Ass Meteor, has 3.5% more multiplier, so it's a good choice. You could use Ball Lightning or Purifying Flame. Heck, you could use whatever skill you want as long as it works with cast on crit and you find it fun. You know, fun, the thing that we always forget about and we try to maximize everything and ruin everything. Now you probably think this is all jokes at this point, so let us show you that you can kill a lot of the bosses. On these bosses, we use the node that makes everything release at once, and we also use the node that increases the effect of all mods by 100%. If you're enjoying the video, remember to like it, and if you want more fast-paced videos with a little bit of comedy thrown in, make sure that you're subscribing to the channel. This was probably the easiest Maven influence Uber Elder that I've ever done. We're wearing Aegis, so we get 1400 ES back every time we block, plus we have a good amount of energy shield regen and energy shield lead. Here is an all-at-once Shaper Guardian invitation with Ball of Lightning, just to show you that in fact we can use other skills. There's nothing very scary about this fight. I avoided the Phoenix nuke just out of habit, so I don't actually know if we can tank it, but I'm guessing that we can. So you could pretty much just hold down the Cyclone move button. Now here is an all-at-once twisted invitation. I went back to FIRESTORM on this kill, so you can see that it's not just a meme. There's nothing that can hurt you on this fight either, so you pretty much just spin on their faces, laugh, and wait for the loot to drop. The lightning guy and the poison guy sometimes go immune, which is going to slow down the fight a bit, but overall, just a smooth, quick fight. Easy peasy. Now let's take a look at an all-at-once Breach Maven invitation. For this fight, I use Purifying Flame. Honestly, after testing Purifying Flame for a bit, I think I prefer it over FIRESTORM. You don't have to deal with the obnoxious visual clutter, and it also has a 300% added damage coefficient. Not only that, but it also drops Consecrated Ground. Now onto an all-at-once sphere. Unfortunately, there are some things that can kill you on this one if you mess up. You'll also probably have to use Flame Dash, so sorry, but you're gonna have to at least play the game a little bit and press 2 buttons. For the Azeri Witness, I swapped out my rings for a 50% elemental reflect reduction ring and used the Pantheon to get another 50% reflect reduction.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Now the mistake I made there is doubling back. I should have kept going in a circle and then just flame dash back into the safe spot. But you know, I squirreled out a little bit squirrely. One thing to mention about Purifying Flame is it has a fizz and an elemental component, so you gotta watch out for both fizz and elemental reflect, so probably don't use that on the Azeri fight. I used this build to kill the Feared for the first time about 2 weeks ago when I was level 94. I had about 7,500 ES at the time. Of course, I had energyblade active at that point in time. I had significantly less gear as the point, so this will function on less gear. Yeah, that Cortex boss definitely hurts, even when it's by itself. In hindsight, I should have focused down that one and the Azeri, because those are kind of the only two that could probably kill me. Really? A Silver Branch? I got all excited for a second. I thought it was actually something good. Now that you saw we can kill most bosses in the game, and have pretty good damage, it's time to talk about the mechanics that make this build possible. Let's start with a breakdown of how we get so much energy shield. When it comes to energy shield, there are really 2 components: flat energy shield and increased energy shield. For flat energy shield, We get a small amount of energy shield from our gear, but the main source of energy shield comes from reserving our life with Ivory Tower. Now, Ivory Tower gives us 30 ES per 100 life, and that's essentially a 30% conversion. Then we have the melding passive node for another 3% for a total of 33% conversion. Now, you might be thinking, if I reserve all my life, how am I gonna not die to chaos damage without shabs? That is explained in the FLASKS section of this guide, so make sure that you're not skipping that. Additionally, we are using energy shield from mana by using Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh with Radiant Fate. We also have a maximum mana as maximum energy shield Watcher's Eye, and there's also a mastery that can be picked up for an extra 3% of maximum mana as extra energy shield. This gives us a total of 23% of mana as energy shield. Then of course, we have discipline on top of that. Here is my full flat energy shield breakdown. Then for percent energy shield, we get a little bit from the tree, but most of it really comes from intelligence and strength stack. With Shaper's Touch, we're getting 1% maximum energy shield for 10 strength, and of course, we get 2% maximum energy shield for 10 int. In my current setup, I have 1,262 strength, 1,226 int, so one might say my Inquisitor is a smarty pants. Wait, no, he doesn't wear any pants. A smarty no pants? Here is a full breakdown of my percent maximum energy shield. Now let's talk about the rest of our defenses. We have Aegis Aurora plus Tempest Shield, 1 block cluster, and glancing blows. This gives us 75% block and 58% spell block. We also have 61k armor from determination plus reserving all of our life with Radiant Fate. This makes it so whenever we block, we are gaining around 1,200 energy shield. Since our mitigation is so high, we can face tank most packs of monsters. Then we have 80 max res due to the +5 max cold res on Aegis plus melding of the flesh. Now it is possible to add Impurity of Ice and increase this further, but that would require me to get a few GG corruptions. And there's none of those on the market, so I can't even buy them if I wanted to. I'm gonna have to do them myself if I choose to go there. Then we have our weakest point, which is Chaos Res. Now I'm currently at 28% Chaos Res, but I hope to replace one of my rings with a better one that has 35% Chaos Res as a suffix, which would put me at 63% Chaos Res. But we have pretty good energy shield, so this is okay at the moment. Additionally, we're using Purity of Elements, which makes us immune to all elemental ailments. Then with our Flask and Purifying Flame, if you go that route, we'd have 50% reduction of curses from Consecrated Ground, 65% from the Flask, and that makes us essentially curse immune. Then I picked up a chest piece that has you take 50% reduced extra damage from critical strikes. I bought this just with the corruptions, and then I used the crafting bench and paid the Vol orbs to be able to 6-socket it and guarantee 6 leak. To recoup our energy shield after we're hit, we have 1k energy shield regen while we're on Consecrated Ground, 930 energy shield per second from Energy Leech, and then I happened to snipe an energy shield on hit Watcher's Eye while I had determination, and I have 7.16 attacks per second with 7.16 triggers of cast on crit per second, which gives us 14 times 30, which is about 420 energy shield per target per second. This gives us a grand total of 2,350 energy shield per second, and we also have the energy shield from block. Now let's talk about how we scale our damage. As I mentioned earlier, we have Energy Blade for a weapon that is almost 4k lightning damage on the top end. We use Instruments of Virtue for Battle Mage. Now Battle Mage adds flat damage to spells based on your weapon. That also gets multiplied by the added effectiveness on the spell. We are stacking Strength and Int, which means we get 1,200% increased crit from Righteous Providence. This also allows us to get 100% crit on most spells, which makes Inevitable Judgment work, and that ignores Elemental Resist. Having some way to either ignore or penetrate resist is even more important than ever this league. Additionally, since we are stacking strength, we also get to use Iron Will, which gives us spell damage per strength. At our current gear level, we get about 250% increased spell damage, which is equivalent to about 25 average passive damage now. Then we also get a decent chunk of percent damage from Transfiguration of Soul due to wearing Crown of the Inward Eye. Now, Transfiguration of Soul gives us damage for percent yes, and we have high percent yes, as I mentioned earlier, from Intelligence stacking and Strength stacking. We also are on low life, which allows us to pick up Pain Attunement for an extra 30% more multiplier. Another way to scale our damage is to get more cast on crit procs, but you gotta be careful with this one. If you're using Awaken cast on crit, you can get to about 7.5 attacks per second, and the procs will keep up with it. However, it's possible to go over the amount of attacks per second that will work for the procs, and this will actually lower your damage. It's some weird thing in the game. There's a lot of people who have covered it, so you can look up that. It's very interesting. Okay, now we're on to the most important part of the video, and hopefully you did not skip this part. If you did, then I guess you won't hear this disclaimer. So it sucks to be all the people who skip this part because they're not going to understand and think the build is shit. But anyways, we have this flask here. And that is how we are not dying with the chaos damage, although we're down to 35 life. Now we have to have this flask permanent. We are doing that by using the trader, which comes from Brutal Restraint. And that is why we are missing 2 flasks. No, it's not because I'm stupid and didn't have 2 flasks. There's actually a meaning behind it, guys. So the whole point behind this is you get 8 flash charges every 5 seconds. And then I have on my belt 38% increased flash charges gained. So I get about 11 flash charges every 5 seconds. And these flasks last longer than 10 seconds. So I infinitely sustain my flasks with this belt. Now, without this belt, you're still going to be able to sustain your flasks for a very, very, very long time. But you will eventually run out. There's also some new mods in the game. They're going to reduce the amount of flash charges you get. And in fact, in like Simulacrum, there's one that makes it so that monster hits make it so that you can't gain flash charges or something. I don't know. There's some nasty flash stuff. So I overcompensated for it by using this flash charges. Now, I'm also using my flask, though, to cap my resists. So you also will have a really bad time if you're not setting up like this. See, I was at -10 because of melding of the flesh. But when I hit this, which is 40% additional elemental resists, I have 80. And then we're using a cold one with the reduced effect of curses, and that in combination with when we're using Purifying Flame, of course, as I mentioned earlier, makes us basically immune to curses. Now these are all set up with reuse at the end of the flask effect. That's because we need no gaps whatsoever. We even have a slight gap here. We're going to take a little bit of chaos damage and fall over and die. Now let's take a look at gear. Now I'm going to warn you, I've been min-maxing this for like 2-3 weeks, and it's not a very popular build, so I've been able to snipe a lot of things that you normally would not be able to get. However, during this gear section, I'm going to talk about some swaps that you could do, so make sure that you're paying attention to those in case you cannot get some of these items. So the first item that we have is Energyblade. You just equip any weapon that you want as long as you can meet the stat requirements, and then you're casting Energyblade, it replaces it. So my weapon without it is just a white foil. Then the next is a Crown of the Inward Eye, and you want one with Energyblades have a 15% increased attack speed. That's because it brings the attack speed per second base up to 1.96, which is very helpful for getting to that 7.5 to be able to get the procs for cast on crit. Now you'll notice that it also has 7.7% base crit, and that is because quality on Energyblade adds an extra 10% increased crit, or 0.7%. Now the Crown of the Inward Eye is very, very good because of all the transfigurations we have, plus it just has life, mana, and global energy shield. And as I mentioned earlier, that's where all the ES is coming. Now for the amulet. Now, I was able to actually snipe this thing for 10x, which is pretty crazy. There's a couple of them listed. If a lot of you guys play this build, these are going to be gone in like 2 seconds. Basically, you want a 32% or as close to 32, which would be max of the attributes roll. And then for the secondary, the best one would be global defenses, followed by mana, followed by life. Now, although life has a better conversion rate, life only goes up to 12, where the mana goes up as 30, and then that gets multiplied by 2. For cheaper swaps, you can use a rare amulet that has increased all attributes. For other swaps, you could use a rare amulet that has % increased all attributes with strength and int on it. You can get that with recombiners. And then in the prefix, you can use like life, mana, and % energy shield. And actually, if you get like the super GG one, it's actually going to outperform this. And for a budget option, you could use Astramentals. Now for our shield, we're using Aegis Aurora, and there are a lot of people playing this earlier in the league, but they were using a Prism Guardian, and then since they weren't going block, they added Grace into the build. So that is another cheaper option. Then for our chest piece, we have an Ivory Tower. I played this for a very, very long time without the implicits, so do not get hung up on that. The most important thing on the implicits to get later, I would say, is this 50% reduced extra damage from critical strikes. These aren't that popular, so you can get a probably 4-link one for like 4x until this becomes popular and then ruins the whole economy. But like, what am I supposed to do? Not make videos? Then we have Shaper's Touch gloves. This should be pretty easy to get, really common drop. And then we just have a corruption for attack speed, and that's because we're trying to hit that 7.5 or pretty close to it for the procs for cast on crit. Now, I'd also like to have a +2 AoE gems or +2 aura gems on this, or like % energy shield. You could still get some better corruptions on what I'm getting, but not bad at all. Now for my belt. So like I said, you don't necessarily need the flash charges. Getting the % attributes and strength is really, really good. I do not have the implicits the way I want it. I've been crafting on this thing suffixes cannot be changed, and then I've been slamming it with harvest, more life mods. Ideally, I would get % max life, tier 1 max life, and then I'd craft on it the maximum energy shield with armor. Then for jewel, I went with a 23 dex because I'm going to be able to drop my ring for chaos res later, so I needed the dex. And then we just went with some life and some energy shield. For boots, we're using the Stampede, and yes, you can anoint these, and I anointed this with Arcane Focus. Now, the nice thing about these boots is your movement speed is always at 150, which makes you cyclone pretty quickly here. If we don't have the boots on, this is what our cyclone looks like. Yeah, we could get a little bit more, but cyclone severely reduces your movement speed, see? I do have this pair of boots here, which is pretty darn good. It's chaos res and 2 stats, but we're significantly slower if we're using this, like I said. But this isn't too bad to use for bosses. It does give us some extra energy shield. Ideally, I'd be on an energy shield base, and I'd have like 200 energy shield boots. Of course, this also gives 4% action speed, so my whole build is configured that when I'm wearing these boots, I would be at the 7.5 attacks. Now, you'll probably see that a lot of people are anointing instead of Arcane Focus here. They are anointing Clever Thief. You need some form of mana leech, or you're not going to be able to keep up with all the mana that you're going through with your skill. Now, I solved this in another way. My cluster jewel I use has Fuel of Fight on it, so that's where I'm getting my mana leech from. And then I got this because the attributes helps me, so I could drop a piece for the dex. I was a little bit short on all res, and then of course, you know, the defenses on the shield, never a bad thing. Now let's take a look at the rings. So basically, this isn't finished yet, but now you probably want a ring that has damage taken recouped as mana, just in case you get yourself into weird situations where there's that stupid mana draining person, stuff like that, that you can maybe out recoup it and continue to cast your skills. The other parts that I wanted for the suffixes really was strength, int, and a good chaos res roll. Of course, I have a dead stat on here, which is the cold damage to attacks. I would have preferred that to be energy shield or mana. But then if it was mana, I couldn't have crafted the recoup. On my other ring, I ended up going to channeling skills, have -3 to total mana cost, which actually makes my cyclone completely free. Very, very nice for that stupid mana drain monster. And like I said, I want to replace the dex on this one with the chaos res roll, or I could replace it with a all attributes roll, which would be a little bit better. Now let's take a look at the passive skill tree and all the jewels that I use. Now, the first instinct when you look at this is going, what the heck is he doing? There's actually a really, really good reason to do this. And that is because we are using 2 split personality jewels that have strength and int. So we want a longer path because you get more strength and more int per allocated passive. So we're actually getting 62 strength, 62 int on both of these. That's the whole reason for this pathing and why we're going all the way around this way and not just like connecting here or something. So for my jewels, I grabbed Melding of the Flesh. This was one of the last things I added. You don't need to add this until very, very late into the build. I was able to do even the Feared without Melding of the Flesh. Then we're using Forbidden Flesh, and we have a Forbidden Flame to give us the Radiant Faith. And this is what's giving us a bulk of our armor, and then of course the energy shield for reserved mana. Then we have the Brutal Restraint, and that's for the flasks. And this is also why on my amulet you saw the Anoint. I actually managed to get one that had 20% elemental damage here and 20% elemental damage here. So this node, by anointing it, gives me 70% elemental damage. So that is why I have Divine Judgment anointed. Then we have a jewel that has spell damage while holding a shield, and then 3 multi-rolls. I still have to divine this up further. Ideally, I would want 4 multi-rolls, but you know, it is what it is. What I got. Then we have a jewel that gives us Corrupted Blood, cannot be afflicted on you. And I managed to get one that actually had 3 damage multiplier, or 3 damage properties. Not the best ones, but you know, not terrible either. I'll probably replace this at some point if I keep investing into the build. Then I have an absolutely disgusting Watcher's Eye. You don't need this thing, okay, at all. The most important thing here is maximum mana as extra maximum energy shield, all affected by clarity. The 30 energy shield gain for each hit is just kind of like a nice to have. As when we went over in the section where we talked about recoup, it's only about 20% of your recoup. You're still going to have very good energy shield recoup between Leech and being on consecrated ground and then having life. I was also able to get this with lightning damage while affected by Wrath, which is pretty darn crazy. Another really good one to get would be one that just gives the clarity. And then you could, instead of using Wrath, you could use Zealotry and get the one that makes consecrated ground while you have Zealotry last a little bit longer. And just use Zealotry, especially if you're not using Purifying Flame. And then the last 2 jewels are the split personnel. For ascendancies, we grabbed Instruments of Virtue, Righteous Providence, Inevitable Judgment, and then we have this for damage. You could also use this, but you're never stationary, but it would be a 15% increased damage taken. I went with this because I'm taking less damage as well and making them take increased damage. You don't really want to be playing this build until you're pretty high level. It will function at lower levels, but like any sort of like aura stacker or strength stacker or anything like that really shines in the last about 10 levels. Now for masteries, I grabbed Shield Mastery here, which gives me 1 crit multi per 10 maximum energy shield. I have 254 on the shield, so I can actually get 25 multi from this. Then we have life. We have life reservation, all attributes, reduce reservation for the mana side, int per allocated passive skill. You might want to do strength instead. You got to look at the balancing between your strength and int. I had it set up for dex for a very long time, just so I can meet the stat requirement. Then we have auras from your skills have increased effect on you. And then I'm going to probably get on the next level the 3% of maximum mana as extra maximum energy. For Pantheons, we don't need this because we actually have immune to stun on the tree because we picked up Unwavering Stance. And we're immune to frozen because of Purity of Elements. I went with Soul of Solaris just because if I'm taking consistent, or if I haven't taken an elemental hit in a while, I get a little bit of reduction. If I get chain critted, then I get no extra damage for some of those. Very nice on like tanking packs if you have really high multi stuff in simulacrum. This is also a really good choice, the Soul of Lunaris. You could go with this one as well. It's probably the weaker of these 2. Then I'm using Unaffected by Burning Ground for Soul Aberrath because I'm running the Searing Exarch monsters and it ignores tons and tons of that stuff. You can go with a different thing if you want. When you're doing Adziri, as I said, I swapped into this. Doesn't really matter too much on the secondary. You can do whatever you want. For this build, we killed all bandits. I think you always should be killing all bandits. Any build, outside of very niche things until they restructure the band. All right, let's take a look at the gems. I'm using energyblade, clarity, precision. Now all of our accuracy comes from the gloves. That is giving +4 accuracy per 2 int. And then we're also getting the accuracy from precision. You need to be accuracy capped, otherwise your cyclone's gonna miss, and then it's gonna mess up your whole cast on crit cycle. And we're wearing Tempest Shield, and then that gets doubled by glancing blows so that we have a nice chunk of spell block. Defiance banner, that gives us armor, or percent armor, arrogance, and discipline. Now I use Vol Discipline as a oh crap button here. Very good idea to do this because it starts your energy shield recharge. It's worth noting here that I have it set up so that it reserves a percentage of my life all the way down. So it's reserving like 99.7% of my life. And that's because if I want to use headhunter or get shrine buffs or something like that, I'll still have all my extra life reserved down. If you have flat things like vitality on it, then it doesn't do that. Then I have cast when damage taken, Molten Shell. And I should really swap this into a Vol Molten Shell, but I've been lazy, and like the whole point of this thing was to not hit buttons. And we have vitality also in the shield. Then the chest piece, I'm using Cyclone, Divergent, Inspiration Support. I don't really need Divergent of this, but I put it in anyways, just in case I get into situations where they're draining my mana. But between the two rings, should be completely fine without Divergent. Using Energy Leech Support. Now I probably should get an alternate quality of this so that I could get a higher maximum because it caps at 10%. Purifying Flame, whatever skill you want is what you use here. Awaken Cast on Crit. This reduces the cooldown recovery rate, so you definitely want to use this. And then increase critical damage support. Remember, we're always critting, so it's just a nice multiplier. Now, when I was using FIRESTORM, you saw some of the times I was using it without Spell Cascade, but if you really want the eye clutter at the start or to like mess with your friends or something, if you're playing in maps, then you would use Awaken Spell Cascade. So you just drop Energy Leech. Then I was using a level 17 Divergent Ball Lightning, which has a chance to supercharge it, which gives it more area of effect and more damage. That's what I showcased when I was using it. Then for the gloves, I'm using Determination, Purity of Elements, Wrath, and Enlighten 3. And then the boots, we have Assassin Mark, Mark on Hit, and Arcane Surge. So on bosses, I'm getting an Arcane Surge proc. I actually can up this a little bit in the mana cost. I've been messing a lot with my mana cost to get it just right. This costs 85 mana, so I should be getting a couple more levels on Arcane Surge. And then we have Flame Dash, and that's just to move out of situations. If you use Shield Charge or you use Leap Slam, which also will work, they don't function very well with the Stampede boots. It's really slow because both of those actually increase your movement speed in the animation. So it makes the animation really, really crap. Now, if you want to turn this into a mapper, it's already good on its own, but adding Headhunter to the build is really ridiculous. And that's because there's a lot of mods that actually scale your energy shield, which will increase the damage of your weapon, which then gets converted into whatever skill you're playing. And you actually can scale your damage with the energy shield. And then you also get all the perks that every other build would get. I want to quickly show you how you can look up budget versions of builds so you can get an idea of what pieces you can wear or what people were wearing early on in the league. So there is something here called the Time Machine in POE Ninja. And let's go back to, let's say, day 5. And then we're going to select Inquisitor. And then here we're going to put in Energyblade. And you can find a couple people here who are actually playing it, really early on. So let's look at this person right here, Dying, and see they were using Prism Guardian. If you take a look over here, they're using Evasion and Armor. And then they also have like Ghost Dance and stuff allocated. But it's kind of similar gear. So Ivory Tower, we're using Crown of the Inward Eye. They're actually using Astramantis. They have cheaper rings, of course, because it's early in the league, but same kind of concept there. They're still using the Shaper's Touch. You could use Cyclone Coil as another budget swap for the belt, which I should have mentioned that. And then, of course, the Stampede. Now, they don't have the Infinite Flask. They're just manually doing it. So that is an option as well. You can equip multiple of these elixirs and then just manually cast them. But my whole point of this build was to be super lazy. And then they had the 2 Forbidden and a split personality and a Watcher's Eye to give them some energy shield leech and then some crap jewels. But they have pretty good survivability. They do probably pretty good damage here. I don't think this is accurate at all because it wasn't keeping, or it's not taking into account energy blade, and it's also not taking into account the inherent property of arc, where it gets more damage on the single target for the amount that did not change.